In your research, you discovered something which has become pretty iconic when we talk about relationships and conflict, which is this idea of the four horsemen. You found that during conflict, couples who show four key behaviors mean that an argument is doomed, and it's the worst way of arguing, i.e., like really nothing can be gained beyond that point. John, what are the four horsemen, and how was this discovered?
Yeah, Bob Levinson and I first looked at just the ratio of positivity to negativity in a conflict discussion. And the first thing we discovered was that among the masters, that ratio was 5-to-1 or higher. And among the disaster couples, it was 0.8, average 0.8-to-1.
What does that mean? Sorry, 5-to-1.
So if you take the number of seconds that they're displaying interest, curiosity, affection, humor, shared humor, validation, listening to one another, saying things like, tell me more. Oh, wow. Oh, good point. Things like that. And you divide that by the number of seconds that they're angry, upset, disappointed, hurt, critical, defensive, belligerent, all of these negative ways, these hostile ways of interacting. That ratio of positivity to negativity was 5-to-1 or higher among relationships that work well.
During conflict.
During the conflict, yeah. So, but the second thing we wanted to know is, well, are all negatives equally corrosive? And the ones that were the most corrosive really involved that person starting off and saying, as far as I can tell, I'm pretty much fine, but you're defective. Here's what's wrong with you. And they started with this criticism that they thought was constructive criticism, and they hoped their partner would respond by saying, God, you're so insightful. Tell me more about how I'm failing. But instead, what they got was defensiveness, counterattack, or the innocent victim posture. And that was the second horseman of the apocalypse. The third one was contempt, and that was the worst. That was the best predictor of relationship breakup of all. That criticism from a place of superiority. I'm better than you. I correct your grammar even when you're angry. Or, I think I'm more punctual and that's really important. Or I'm tidier than you are. Or I'm better informed than you are. That sort of snobbery that, looking down on their partner.
May I add something?
Sure,
honey?
Go ahead.
With contempt also, you've got things like name calling, calling people bad names, sarcasm, mockery. Sarcasm can have a real cutting edge. It can be funny, but then it crosses over into hurt.
And the fourth horseman is stonewalling, which was particularly a guy thing to do. 85% of the time, guys would stonewall. They just shut down, and they don't give these cues to the speaker that they're listening. They're not nodding their heads or moving their facial muscles or uttering these vocalizations like, not doing that. They just kind of shut down and look away. And, when we found those people's physiology is really elevated.
So it wasn't about whether couples were arguing or not, because we typically think a relationship is doomed if the couple are like screaming at each other.
Again, it depends on your definition.
Okay.
So screaming at each other is one form of argument. And there are certain couples that are volatile where both partners are volatile. They're very passionate. They're very intense. They may raise their voices. But depending on what's coming out of their mouths, is it criticism? Is it contempt? Is it defensiveness? If it's any of those, it's not going to work. But you can also scream, I'm so furious about this. Still describing yourself. That's not going to be a bad thing.
Why is it men, talked about stonewalling there, where you kind of shut down and you kind of go within yourself and ignore. Why is it that men do that more than women?
Well, what I think is that we men are much more easily physiologically aroused. And the differences are that we secrete vasopressin and women secrete oxytocin much more than vasopressin. And so for us, once we get physiologically aroused, it takes us a long time to calm down. And most of what we feel when we get physiologically aroused is anger and aggression. And we want to shut our partner down. We're much more aggressive than women are. And so we shut ourselves down, and when you look at the dialogue that people have in their minds when they're stonewalling, it's usually stuff like, just shut up and don't say anything. You know, you always make it worse when you say something. So just be quiet, endure this. And that's kind of a male response.
Do men have more of a physiological response to arguments, i.e. like the sweating palms and the blood pressure?
So. Through evolution, women have been responsible for nurturing an infant. In order to do that, you have to have a milk letdown response, right? Through evolution. So here's what I mean. Let's say, we're back 3,000 years, right? There's no formula in a can. So women are breastfeeding their infants. In order for that breast milk to come down and in order to be released to the infant, oxytocin is really important. Oxytocin calms you down. It relaxes you. If you're very tense and uptight, milk isn't going to come down at all. So women have the physiology in which to relax more easily. Men, on the other hand, through evolution, have been the protectors, right? So if there's a saber-toothed tiger attacking a group of people, who's going to jump up and defend against that tiger? Well, the men are typically. So men's bodies are really built to stay vigilant and hypervigilant, especially for attack. Well, that attack doesn't have to be physical. It can also be mental, emotional, verbal, and men will have the same response.
We're talking about flooding here, aren't we? The concept
We're talking
of
about flooding, yeah.
Yes.
What is flooding, John?
So flooding is really going into fight or flight. It's when we start secreting cortisol and adrenaline, our two major stress hormones. And when we feel attacked, when we feel unsafe, we start secreting these stress hormones. And there are implications, psychological implications of being physiologically flooded. You can't take in new information. You're relying on overlearned habits like aggression or flight. You can't listen very well. Your hearing is compromised. Your peripheral vision is compromised. You focus only on the cues you need to survive the moment. And so you don't wind up being a very creative problem solver or a good listener when you're flooded.
If men flood more than women, does this go to explain why men tend to avoid arguments more than women? Because I think that's a stereotype, at least, that men are much more avoidant in arguments. It's a stereotype that holds true to me. I've never been sure whether it's because we're not good at expressing our emotions or if there's a physiological reaction in me that's making me go, oh.
80% of the time, women are the ones bringing up issues in a relationship. Now, when guys bring up the issues, sometimes the women get flooded too. So It's not that women don't get flooded. Yeah, they're a little better at self-soothing than we are. But, during an argument, if a woman gets flooded, she really can't listen also. And she repeats herself as well, gets more strident,
If I'm flooded then, typical advice tells me, John, it says, never fall asleep if you and your partner have been arguing about something.
Yeah.
What is the best, I get flooded sometimes, what is the best way for me to deal with that?
If it's late at night, you should go to sleep. Go to sleep angry. St. Paul was the one who started that, and he wasn't married. So it's, it sounds like great advice, but if it's going to keep you up and, you're going to get a terrible night's sleep, shake hands and go to bed. Give each other a quick kiss and go to bed angry.
What did he start? St. Paul? What did St. Paul start?
Never go to bed wrathful, I think, is what his advice was for couples.
And that's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm in the middle of an argument and I feel like I'm a little bit flooded, maybe my palms are a little bit sweaty, I should take a time out, is what you're saying, Julie.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So if you're feeling flooded, you really need to take a break. But There's specific steps to do that. One, if you're flooded, you say, I need to take a break. You don't say, you do. I need to take a break, and say when you'll come back to continue the conversation. If you do that, then your partner is not going to feel abandoned and rejected. You go apart for maybe 30 minutes, an hour, however long, maximum 24 hours, and you don't think about the fight. Don't plan your rebuttal because that'll keep you flooded as long as you keep thinking about the fight. So do something self-soothing like reading a book, reading a magazine, working out, maybe going for a run.
Get on your computer.
Get on your computer, do your email. Don't watch murder mysteries. That's not a good thing to do. So come back at the designated time when hopefully your body is a lot calmer and continue the conversation.
But, generally consistent result is that women tend to be more unhappily married than men. Guys often think everything's fine.
Oh my God. So true. I had this conversation with a former partner where I said, and I shouldn't have said it, but I'm just going to be honest. I said to her, in our relationship, I think if you never raised an issue, I think there'd never be an issue.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like everything was always fine. And every week she was coming to me with a problem. And had she not come to me with that problem, I think, and I might be BSing myself here, I think the relationship would have just been great.
Right.
That's how it felt.
And women have a lot more depression than men do as well. So I think in a lot of ways, the world is harder for women. The world's a more dangerous place for women, for example. The probability that a woman will be physically or sexually assaulted in her lifetime is 40%. It's 9% for men in the United States. I think it's harder to be a woman than it is to be a man.